This light is huge.
That is a big light.
It's a key light.
Is it battery powered?
It is. No, it plugs into the wall. In fact, the power brick is for an LED lamp is like kind of, that's
ridiculous.
Significant power brick for something that is just lumens. But
welcome to our light podcast.
I guess I should say I'm talking about this Elgato key light that I just got in.
Ooh,
what do you do for face lighting? You've got a big spot shining on your mug.
I don't have a big spot. What I have is one of those. It's a IKEA like collapsible ball light, one of the paper ones that hangs from the ceiling right up behind the camera. Oh, and it has a dimmable Cree light bulb in there that I can adjust, like
literally sort of like a paper lampshade. I bet that's like a nice diffuse kind of light, then, right? It's oh my god,
one of those.
Wow.
So it's a big round ball with metal frame in it.
In the blown out webcam that just looked like the sun.
Yeah, it took a minute to
gigantic flaming luminous orb.
As I was picking up the camera to aim it at the light, I realized that literally you're the only one who will ever see that. So there you go.
I am part of a privileged few that has seen behind the curtain.
I don't know that I have ever actually shown that before. I'm looking to see what the name. It's like a Luma base, I think, is what it's I can't find the IKEA name, but it was like it's the $10 hack. Oh, Regolith pendant lampshade.
Are you into IKEA hacks? Is that an episode topic that I shouldn't be burning right now?
Look, in my heart, I like the concept of IKEA hacks. But in practice, the IKEA hacks are always somewhat disappointing.
Just a little too hacky.
Yeah, you like I want somebody to tell me how to turn my daughter's queen size. Like, where is it safe for me to cut off? Can I get like another dresser for my daughter and make a loft bed by cutting the legs off of her queen size bed and then putting the two dressers up?
Do you really want to entrust your child's safety to the internet?
I mean, I don't let her on YouTube, so I feel like I'm already one step ahead.
Enough said.
Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
Hey, Will, I'm trying not to cough. You started doing the intro, and I was like, should I stop him? And then hang on, just talk amongst yourself.
Okay, I'll just do it again. That's fine. This week we're doing it's the pajama sweat pod.
I don't even want to mention how long it's been since I bathed.
Pod. It's not the sweatpants tech pod. It's the pajamas tech pod.
It's been a week. It's been a week around here.
Yeah. How's your? Well, I'm sure I can look on the site and see what you think about the discourse and the topics of the day. Mm-hmm. But you know what we're going to talk about today is a different kind of disaster.
Oh boy, this episode's off to an appropriate start. Then, what do you got?
I think the stories that we tell each other when we're like, you know what, it could be worse. And then it's like the time that I, almost died while I was working on computers.
As far as it could be worse type stories go, that one's up there. I'm going to say, like, when you've gotten to the point of I almost died, there's really only one more example of could be worse after that.
I mean, I feel like losing digits probably is in between I almost died and I actually died.
Okay, sure. I have a family member who lost a pinky to a circular saw.
Yeah,
and so
that happens.
I'm somewhat acquainted with. Yeah.
I have friends who have like it's funny. Our friend of mine was like, I'm going to get real into woodworking around the time Vinny got into woodworking, as I recall, and he went to the woodworking, the local woodworker's shop to get some wood and to get some knives and chisels and tools and all that. And he walked in and he was looking around and there were a bunch of the old timers in there. He's like, man, this is awesome. There's a bunch of old guys hanging out. Like there's a guy probably smoking a pipe out back. And then he looked around and he started counting fingers and he was like, every single one of these guys is missing at least part of a finger. He's like, and that was when he decided he was going to do hand tools instead of power tools.
What's the, What's the woodworking equivalent of a screwdriver shop? Is it the lathe shop?
No, man, it's the hardwood shop. Have you ever been in a good hardwood vendor?
No.
Oh, there's a place in the city down off Bayshore, like between Bayshore and the Tenderloin and Cesar Chavez in that triangle. And it's called McBeath Hardwood. And when you go in there, there's all these they look like crusty, like I would associate them as crusty hardware store guys from like back home. But they're super sweet and really helpful and willing to answer a bunch of questions, no matter how dopey they are.
Those are experienced craftsmen.
Yeah, and like that place is amazing because like you go if you want a piece of cheap wood, you go to Lowe's, and then you can like take a bendy ass strut 2x4 that you use for building a house and maybe make it what you want. But if you want something that's like made of mahogany or teak or some sort of endangered hardwood that you probably aren't supposed to buy, I don't know, something
luxurious.
McBeath is very good. Yeah. And you can get a 13 ply sheet of beech plywood, 4 feet by 8 feet. That's like, it's like $100.
Wow.
And is like perfectly planar. That's what I made my daughter's shelves out of.
I love planar.
Yeah,
it can't get any more flat.
Nope.
All right, I'll keep that in mind in the far-flung future where I somehow have the woodworking capacity to build a desk.
Yeah,
to build the desk.
I did that once.
To build the butcher block countertop desk of my dreams. I'll keep that place in mind.
You know the secret of butcher blocks, right?
What's that?
You get butcher blocks from old bakeries. When bakeries go out of business.
Like a legit one?
Yeah,
God, sorry, I'm just a real frog in the throat today. I'm talking
okay.
like, man, there might be like flour down in there or something, like some remnants of actual cooking in your desktop.
You've been making dough?
I don't know about that.
You got your sourdough game up?
Not so much, no.
Oh.
No.
Gina made sourdough last week. It was very good.
Ooh.
But, that wasn't a disaster. And you know what is?
What's that?
Segway's strong this morning. Well, so I used to work IT before I started at Maximum PC. Before we started ours, I was the IT guy, one of the 3 IT people for the Department of Biology at the University of Tennessee. So
this is in the Wang era.
This is post Wang.
Oh.
Wang was like 93.
Okay.
This would have been in 92, 93. This would have been like 98 to 2000.
Okay.
I feel like I quit in maybe like February of 2000.
Oh, wow.
And I took that job. Like I finished school and I was talking to my advisor. I was like, I'm not going to go to med school because I don't want to be a fucking doctor. It seems like a terrible idea. And he was like, well, what are you going to do? I was like, I don't have any idea. He's like, didn't you do like work? Whenever I was telling you, hey, you need to get your grades up, you were like, oh, well, I'm, assembling networks and building computers for people all into the night. So, definitely not playing Quake. And he was like, aren't you good at computers? There's a spot open in the IT shop here at the Division of Biology. I was like, oh, well, I'd pay my bills. That sounds good. So I did that.
For how many years? That sounds like
18 months.
Oh, that's it. Okay.
Year and a half.
Okay.
I went from making about $25,000 a year working nights and weekends building computers and running networks for people to making $25,000 a year working 80 or 90 hours. Like I took the job because I was like, maybe I can get a master's while I'm doing this and like do the night school master's program while I'm working here during the day. And then there was no way because it was like an 80-hour a week job. It was terrible.
That's rough. So it was just the last 18 months that you were a professional?
Yeah, that was 18 months that I was a professional.
So all before that was just kind of moonlighting.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I paid for school.
Okay,
I put up flyers and put in newspaper ads. We're like, hey, do you want a network? And everybody wanted a network. Nobody knew what they needed a network for, but they all wanted networks.
IPX, it's hot technology.
Yeah, you got to get that. You need a file server to share the files because like putting stuff on a floppy drive and carrying it down the hall. That's 90s tech. You want to be ready for the 2000s, man.
You're probably going to want a print server. Might want to.
Yep. Shared printer. I did a lot of like Y2K BIOS updates and stuff like that around that time too.
Also, I just want to state for the record that playing Quake is a professional consideration because how else are you going to test that network?
That's true.
you gotta stress test.
That's how I learned that's why I learned about networks was so that we could set up a LAN and we could play Quake. It was, you couldn't use the dial up. Anyway. So I got a call one day when I was working the help desk and we had a ticket system and I got like 4 or 5 tickets within about 10 minutes that were the network and Ayers Hall was down. Ayers Hall was the oldest building on campus at the University of Tennessee. And the network, it was one of the first places that got network in the campus, but they did it with coax there. So it was a 10 base 2 barrel like cable network, and that stuff you would run the two ends of a cable into a T, and then you'd plug the T into the back of the network card.
Is that what the T in 10 base T is? Or
no,
that's probably a very naive question.
That's a different thing. I don't know what the
I've never heard of 10 base 2 before.
The T might indicate the number of
like wires or
electrical
something?
connections.
Okay.
Yeah, because there's, I don't know.
Maybe
On 2, it's a coax cable. So there's a shield and a center.
Okay,
it's like cable kind of, but different ends.
Okay. That has nothing to do with the phrase "twisted pair" just popped into my head for the first time in probably 2 decades.
So twisted pair is because inside an Ethernet cable, each pair, there's 4 pairs of wires, right? And Ethernet uses two pairs, so 4 total wires. And each of the wires is twisted at a different density of twists per inch, so that they don't interfere with each other.
Okay.
So just because of the way the 2 pairs, because you're sending one signal and an opposite, then the interference on each one cancels out, and twisting them at different percentages or something. This is electrical engineering stuff. I don't know what I'm talking about, but the gist is
you made it work.
They're all twisted at different amounts. That's why they're called twisted pairs. If you take an Ethernet cable and you strip the shielding off and you untwist the cables in the middle, it will stop working right.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, a metal connector on the T, and you were supposed to only run one of these from the wall into each computer, but you could daisy chain up to like 24 of them on one long chain. Ayers Hall, old building, like the wiring was put in after the building was built, and they did the conduit, and then they just bolt on a breaker, a box, a gang box for the power plugs.
It's a lot of good jargon in this episode so far.
Oh yeah.
Gang box.
Gang box. Gang box is the thing that like your power outlets are in the wall. Okay. So they usually hammer them into a stud, and then you put a faceplate over them.
Got it.
But if you can't do that because it's an old building, then they would stick a little metal box on the outside and screw it into the wall. Anyway, I get up there, I go to the first one. I'm like, all the people who are complaining are on the same network chain. That's weird. So I start at the far end of the network chain, and I start, unplugging. And when you got to the end of one of those chains, you get to put a terminator on the other part of the T. So it's like a little cap, basically, with a resistor in it. And I took a terminator, and first thing you did was pop off the terminator and replace it, and that was fine. And I keep going further down. I'm going to ask everybody, hey, is your computer working? Is the network fine? Blah, blah, blah. And I find the one that's like, no, my network's not working. I reach under there, grab it, and I can't let go of the T. Like once I touch the T, my hand grips on, and I'm like, oh, this is really bad. I can't let go with my hand. My muscles only go one way now.
Was there any pain at this point? Or just
it didn't feel good.
Okay.
It wasn't like getting stabbed. It wasn't like when I stepped on a nail as a kid.
Okay.
It was I don't know if you've ever like brushed up against the metal on when you're plugging in a lamp or something, just grazed it a little bit.
You mean the actual plug?
You
mean the actual plug?
Yeah.
As it's contacting the outlet? I don't think
Have you ever zapped yourself just a little bit?
I don't think so.
Yeah. So it feels like it. Okay. So it's less bad than getting tased.
I have been tased before. Although this was like a consumer level taser.
Getting tased. Don't do that. That's a stupid idea.
Yeah,
if you can avoid getting tased, don't.
This was perhaps the biggest asshole in my entire high school. Got his hands on something and went wild in the lunchroom.
What the hell? You got tased at school?
Again, it was like a little zap. I don't know what this was not like law enforcement grade.
Okay. So anyway, I grabbed it. I couldn't let go. I'm freaking out at this point. I just yanked the power brick out, the power strip out from the wall, and it doesn't stop.
Oh man.
So I'm like, oh, this is really bad. And like, I don't know how long this is, probably 20 seconds at this point. So I wrench my whole hand around, just as like rotate my wrist as hard as I can, because it's like a locking twister on the connector where it goes on the PC, and I managed to get my whole arm around enough that the connector comes off. And as soon as I get the connector off, I'm able to release my hand.
Wow.
I was like, what caused this? So I literally went office to office. And I was like, I realized what it was because somebody floated a ground across the whole line. Because the outlets in that building are ungrounded, so you have to use a grounding adapter on every piece of electronics that you plug in the building. One of those 2-prong things that has a little wire that goes into the gang box. And I went room to room, just yanking people's power strips out. I was so pissed. And
I'm excited for when you found the culprit.
And I found there was this lady. Her name was Agnes something. And she'd been a secretary a secretary, not a personal assistant or whatever, but a secretary at the college for probably 50 years at this point. Wow. She was maybe 70 years old.
Wow.
And she had taken a power strip. She didn't have one of the little things that makes it a ground, that grounded it. And she just broke off the third prong.
I knew that was coming. And I hate when people do that. I don't even have the
ground.
Yeah. I don't even have the electrical knowledge to know why I hate when people do that, but I know it's bad and you shouldn't do it.
Yeah. So 2 things on that. One is that probably she was responsible for all the weird computer shit that happened on that network chain for years. And 2, don't break the prongs off of your grounding.
Man.
Don't break the grounding prong.
Did you have a stern conversation?
I was so luckily.
Did anyone know? Did anybody know about this?
So my boss, whose name was Rod Button, at the school, the delightful man. I learned a ton from him. When so I called him when I got off the computer. I was like, "Hey," I told him what happened. He was like, "Oh, I'll be right there. Don't do anything," because he could tell I was pissed. And I don't get pissed very often. It's an unusual, I can think of like maybe 4 times in the last 25 years. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go find out where the float is. And that's when I started yanking people's things off without turning off their computers first. And he got up there. He must have run. He got up there right about the time I started yelling at her.
Oh, wow.
He was like, "You need to go home now, Will. Thank you. You did a good job here." And he sent me home. So
wow.
I went and grabbed a double quarter pounder or something at McDonald's and ate that in the car and went home and took a nap because I was real tired. Jeez. I wasn't sure why.
Do you have, I'm trying to think like what the best question to ask here is. Like, do you have any sense of how close to actual disaster that was? Like if you had held on longer, or if like X, Y, or Z had happened, if it would have been extra bad?
I don't think if I had some sort of undiagnosed heart condition or something, that could have been bad.
Sure.
I don't think I don't know if you've ever had, like, when my mom hurt her leg years ago, she had one of those TENS units that you put on to maintain muscle tone. And we would fuck around with that when she wasn't using it for medical purposes and like put it on our legs and stuff and watch your leg kick out like crazy.
Of course, as you do.
Yeah, as one does. It was like worse than that, but not that much worse than that. Okay. So it's like, I don't think I was like in Wes Craven's Shocker territory where I was going to start smoking and my eyeballs were going to melt out or anything.
Sure.
But it was not, look, at the moment, and probably I was connected for 35-40 seconds at the outside, okay, right? Like before I managed to yank, like worst case, I could have probably pulled the cables from their connectors if I'd had to like really deal with the problem. But yeah, it was a bad day.
Did you ever get an apology?
No, she didn't think she did anything wrong. They expected me to apologize. So I was like, well, fuck that. What? That's not happening. Yeah. So man. I was, look, when you're in a university environment and you yell at the nice old lady that people tolerate because she's been there for a really long time, not that they particularly like.
Yeah.
There's going to be consequences.
I get it. There's a certain amount of inertia that kicks in places like that. I don't know where to go from that. None of my stories are even remotely close to that level of severity.
You've had some adventures, like you did the hot swap bias thing that we talked about.
Yeah, we talked about that one. I mean, I guess the risky part of that is that I put my roommate's computer in danger while he was out of town because he happened to have the exact same motherboard model I did.
Look, that's what roommates are for.
So just, I know I've told the story, but if anybody doesn't remember, I corrupted my BIOS somehow. I forget how. I was trying to flash some kind of custom BIOS or something. And the solution, have you ever done it?
I've never pulled a BIOS ROM, I don't think.
I had read about it, being possible. And I was like, well, my motherboard will not boot. So this
is the moment. Yeah.
The idea is just you boot a known good BIOS. You boot a computer, a full computer with a known good BIOS. pull the BIOS ROM out after the computer is running, put the bad one in, and run the flash again, and it totally worked. Both computers were fine forever after.
That's amazing.
Gosh. I think my current computer that I'm recording this on right now, which is a 7700K, it started as a 6700K. I took that chip out and put it in my NAS a couple years ago. But when I first built it like 5 years ago, I don't know what I was thinking. There was something like dusty, or there was some fuzz or something on there. And I just pulled my t-shirt out to like kind of wipe some of the dust off.
On the CPU?
This was around the CPU socket after I had pulled the little guard off.
Okay.
Like a complete idiot, just completely thoughtless.
Oh, you got the pins?
So the pins were exposed. You know how the pins are diagonal now? What is that? A socket 1151? Whatever the Skylake socket is, like the one they've been using for the last like
1151 or 1153. I always get those mixed up.
Right, but you know how so God, like I would almost do a whole episode on like CPU sockets over the years.
Socket 7. That was a good one.
I kind of hate the one that they're on now. I liked when the pins were on the chip and the socket was an actual socket with holes in it. Personally.
So, having done both sides of this for a long time and having built a lot of PCs at Maximum PC, I would much rather destroy a motherboard than a CPU.
Fair. At least it's cheaper, if nothing else.
It's way cheaper to fix.
Although the way motherboard pricing is going lately, I don't know how long that'll be true.
Well, yeah, and with the number of pins they'd have to pack on now, it's a lot.
You make a good point. Okay, you've won me over.
Logic wins.
But you know how it is now. Like those sockets, at least I don't know what AMD is doing these days. I guess maybe I'll find out in the next year or two. But on those Intel sockets, the pins are like diagonal. Yeah, they're kind of bent, or there's some tension on them, and the contacts obviously are on the underside of the CPU package. Anyway, whatever. I used my t-shirt to try to wipe part of the board off, and the fabric snagged right on those pins and bent several dozen of them in a bunch of crazy directions.
Oh God! And did you have to do the mechanical pencil trick?
This was a brand new motherboard. I used a pocket knife.
Oh, really?
This was a brand new motherboard. Like, I was in the middle of this fresh new build for the first time in like 5 years. I was all excited, and I was like, oh my God. Spent most of the afternoon, like 3 hours with this, like, just as close as I could get my face to the board with this pocket knife, trying to manually bend each pin back into basically the same angle as the regular ones. And said, what else is there to do except finish this build and pray? And got it put together, and it booted. Like I've been running this machine for 5 years, and it's never been a problem.
We had one of the first Athlons. I think it was one of the first Athlons. We got it in at Max PC for a photo shoot, and they had a new photo intern, and she didn't know, maybe I can't remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter. They didn't know how, like, when you're setting up stuff for photos, like what was okay and what was not okay for different kinds of hardware. And they put the pins for this prototype Athlon that we were putting on the cover of the magazine in like that sticky contact, like that the like earthquake putty.
Oh my.
And so it would prop up right for the photo.
Oh, sure.
We had to, I had to get like basically tweezers to pull the goo off of the pins.
Is this, I'm guessing, a part that had to go back to AMD at some point?
Probably, but we needed it for benchmarks before that.
Okay.
So like, and like, you don't want to call them, often they would send photo dummies like that had the logo on the top instead of all the confidential stuff. We always like to do the real chips because I think they're much cooler. But yeah, that was a bad time. The mechanical pencil trick. I don't think it works on the BGA sockets.
Totally makes sense. Like I assume you would take the graphite out and just use the tubing to kind of grip the pin and
straighten it up. Yeah,
I just didn't have one of those handy.
It's probably too small for the diagonal ones. The diagonal ones are probably too small.
They're also, I don't think they're round. I think they're kind of a flat shape, aren't they? Those
but I mean, it's probably still, as long as the diameter's
it might still fit. Yeah, that was a good time. You've got way more than I do, though.
I accidentally wiped. So one of the recurring themes in my life is that there's a period of time after which I'm too tired to do good work and be safe, and I should stop working then. And I finally started to realize that point now. I did not know that when I was in my 20s, and we had to update. We had a security update for the Windows NT 3.51 servers that ran our mail server. This was at UT again. Our mail server, our like groupware server, which was a Lotus Domino server, which is a whole other topic. And one other thing, I can't remember what the other one was. They were all running NT 3.51. We had to install the security update from the university IT department wanted us to install the security update. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. I scheduled downtime starting at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon. And I was like, okay, I'll install this. It'll take like a half hour and then we'll reinstall. What I didn't know, because I didn't set up these servers and my boss had moved on to other things, so I couldn't ask him and I wasn't really paying that much attention, is that in the servers, the data drive was the C drive and the boot drive was the D drive for no apparent reason other than my guess is it happened during a migration.
I didn't know that was even possible back then. I didn't know that was possible now, for that matter.
Yeah, you can label the drive. You can make the drive whichever one you want.
Huh. I could have sworn that they always locked boot to C, but
well, anyway, I mean, it's also possible he used some janky third-party utility that made it happen.
Yes, but very common back then.
I was like, okay, here's the install process for this thing. You wipe the drive, you reinstall, you do this, yada yada. You know what? That's not actually how it worked. What happened was the patch went bad. And I had to restore the drive from backup. And I restored the wrong drive. I restored the system image to the wrong drive, to C instead of D, and C was the data drive. So then I had two system drives
and no data.
And I did this on all three servers. And the backup solution we had was this big tape backup that had like a robot arm that would pull the tapes out of the thing. It was really cool. But it was so slow and it had to run over the network, which was a 10 megabit network. So even though the hard drives were relatively small, it took like 8 hours per to do the restore.
Was that something you needed to babysit or could you just start it and go home?
Well, I wasn't going to go home and then come back at 3 o'clock in the morning to finish so that the mail server would be back up when people got to work at 6 o'clock the next morning.
Boy.
So I finished at about 5:55 a.m.
Wow.
And like just left a note on the other people's desk. It was like, I'm home. Page me if you need me. And
I'm not sure that one's on you. I'm not sure that like whoever decided to put in crucial data on a C drive might be the responsible party here.
Well, so I should have noticed after that. One of the things that we did was when we had to do like after hours maintenance was we made sure that the person who was doing that was the start of their day, not the end of their day, because like the problem is, you're doing that kind of work all day and you get dull at the end of the day and you don't notice obvious stuff. So
sure.
Anyway, you want another one? You want to you want to hear
looking at this list.
The
next 3 weeks of the show could be this.
This is the benefit of working. I think at one point we figured that we built between us 4 computers a month, probably at Max PC.
Wow. Was that specifically for review purposes? Like you were getting stuff in and you needed to put it through its paces, or was that just for office needs?
Mostly for review. Like it was mostly you would do like if you needed to do a bunch of benchmarks, sometimes it was easier to just build 2 identical machines than it was to run all the machine and run 2 sets of benchmarks at the same time on 2 different cards. Stuff like that.
Were you guys, this is a total aside, but were you guys paying for much of that hardware out of your budget, or did you have enough of a relationship with hardware makers at that point that like, you could just be like, hey, send us 3 more Pentiums?
So Intel and AMD and NVIDIA and ATI and then AMD were pretty good about sending as much hardware as we needed for stuff. It was always on loan, so we would use it and then stuff would go back. Video cards after the initial launch window, when they stopped having reference board designs, we had to get from vendors usually, which meant that you were in a tricky spot because like sometimes the PNI one would be like 10 megahertz faster than the EVGA one or whatever. So you always had to adjust clocks accordingly. But yeah, for the most part, we had to buy the stuff we had to buy. We had a big hardware budget while we were there, but it wasn't like $20,000 a month. It was like $5,000 a month probably. And that a lot of our contribs came out of we would steal from contribs when we didn't have to buy hardware. So steal that for contribs when we didn't have to buy hardware.
Sure.
We did this we wanted to visualize airflow through a case one time. And Gordon Ung, who's a dear friend and was one of our editors there, was like, "Hey, I have a smoke machine that I have for parties."
Oh boy!
So we were in the lab, which was a closed room in the office, and Gordon was like, "I'll bring it in." We built a cardboard duct to hook the smoke machine into the PC. And we were testing it for a photo shoot, and we're like, "Shit, this works! This is awesome!" You can see the air going in the front. It was blowing around. It was like swirling. There were eddies around the video card and the other cards, and then blows out the back. This is super cool. This is going to totally work. And about that time, it's like, "Hey, there's a smoke detector in here. You think the fog machine triggers a smoke detector?" And right at that moment, every smoke alarm in the building went off because they were all connected to each other. And we had to evacuate the 400 people that worked in the office building while the fire department came. The good news is this was much less bad than the time right before I started working there where they tried to test a fire safe by soaking a bunch of those Duralite fire logs in kerosene and then stacking them up on the asphalt around the edges of the fire safe.
Oh boy.
And lighting them on fire. I believe that they caught the asphalt on fire, but it might have just melted when they did that. Yeah. And the fire department had to come with fire trucks and water for that one. Huh. For mine, they just had to show up and be like, "No, we'll turn off the smoke alarms."
Wow, that fire safe one. Holy crap. So maybe contact the fire department before you embark on such an undertaking.
Look, in print publishing, you don't think about before as you think. Right. Like the consequences are all easily covered up. Right. So you
always ask forgiveness, not permission. Mm-hmm. That's the way to go. I almost feel like I should pick one of these and just ask about it.
Go for it.
God, there's so many here.
20 years, Brad.
I've always wondered about this myself because it seems like an ever-present danger. It looks like at some point you swapped the CPU and PCI Express cables out of the PSU inadvertently.
Yeah, I'm not sure that this one was me. I think this one might have been somebody else in our lab, but I remember the fallout from it. So when modular PCs were new and 8-pin power connectors were new at the same time, the PCI Express, the 8-pin power connector for the PCI Express and the 8-pin is the same as 2 of the 4-pin CPU secondary power connectors, the one that usually is upright by the CPU socket.
Right. Like pin compatible, like same shape, same sort of connector design.
Same keying on the connector.
That seems like an oversight.
I think by the time anybody realized it was going to be a problem, it was probably too late. So they're wired differently, but they're mechanically compatible.
Right.
And the upshot is you can plug it one way and nothing happens. You plug it the other way and smoke comes out. So, yeah, we made smoke come out. It was bad. It was a prototype video card, I'm sure. It was probably a prototype power supply.
Boy.
And now every time you see one of those, I don't think we were the only ones who did this. But they didn't, when it was probably a early review unit or something, but it didn't have labels. So you had to know that the one that was 2 4-pin connectors split was not for video cards. And yeah, we made a mistake.
That's okay. That's maybe forgivable or understandable.
I mean, look, a lot of these are because we were dealing with like there's one, I didn't put this on here, but we killed a prototype video card once that had like debug jumpers on it still, which are like little wires that jump connectors on the board.
Sure.
Where they're figuring out different routes and stuff through the board and they're testing the board. And plugging it in, I yanked one of those loose and didn't realize it.
Oh no.
Yeah, that was an easy. Resoldering it fixed it. But
okay.
Yeah.
I thought you meant you burned the card out.
No.
Did you know that? Speaking of like connector compatible but not wiring compatible, that like you've got modular power supplies, the different brands of the modular cables across different vendors aren't even compatible.
There's no spec.
Right.
This is what the IEEE does, man.
Because like I ran out of, God, I forget exactly. Like I think I have a Seasonic now and my previous one was a Corsair and I ran out of the cables for the Seasonic and I still have all those old, because the Corsair died. So I have all the cables from it. And I was
just throw them in the trash. They're valueless.
Yeah, totally. I was like, I've got a bunch of old cables from that old power supply that died. I'll just grab one of those. And thank God, I went and just like something popped into my head. I was like, I should maybe go make sure that these cables all are interoperable before I plug anything in. And it was horror story after horror story of people saying, like, do not mix and match cables from different power supply companies. You will fry everything.
Dude, you can't even use them between the same company on different lines.
Right. It's and they're not labeled. Well,
Corsair labels them all now. It even like my Corsair cables even say like AX 750 only.
That's great. This is from like 5 to 8 years ago. But yeah, it's computers. Somebody should be watching over this stuff.
It's funny when you talk about how the industry kind of sucks because adoption of new things takes a long time. And then you look at like that's a place that there could totally be a standard that says, hey, here's the standard connector for, Molex. Here's the standard connector for this amount of current, blah, 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 blah. But they couldn't wait to make a standard. So everybody has their own dumb thing.
So what you're saying is those consortiums are good for something after all.
Yeah. Let's see. What are the sexy ones here? The Death Star raid hot swap was a good one.
What kind of raid are we talking?
It was a raid 0 stripe.
Is the Death Star the infamous
at 75 GXP?
Is that the most infamous? Like, I feel like there's kind of a long history of infamous hard drive models, but I'm not sure if that's the worst one.
I think it's it probably had it had a big class action. I don't know if it was big. It's probably not big by today's standards because there's more hard drives in the world now. But it had, I think the problem it had, it also was really prevalent because it was the fastest drive you could buy for a long time.
Okay.
Because it was the first one that uses those glass platters. And it was a ridiculously fast hard drive for spinning platters.
Oh, the Desk Star was the actual name of that thing.
Yes.
Okay.
The Hitachi 75 GXP Desk Star.
Right. IBM was involved with that too, right?
Yeah, it was. I think IBM designed the drive, and then they sold their hard drive division to Hitachi during this process because it was, IBM was getting out of that kind of business. You'd hear a clunking sound, and then the drive would never boot back up again.
Right.
And I heard the clunking sound one day, and I was like, I have a hot swappable RAID card in here. I can just plug another drive in. So I just left the computer on, and I had drives around because Maximum PC, and just popped in a new drive and copied everything off of the RAID onto the drive and got almost all the files before it shit the bed. Almost.
Not quite.
There were a few corrupted files and stuff like that, but it wasn't a big deal. Those drives failed. The heads would crash, and then dust would get around inside the internal parts of the drive, and that would make the heads crash more. And eventually, if they ran long enough, it would delaminate the magnetic medium that held your data, so that it was just spinning disk platters inside the drive.
Huh. Wow.
It was really, you'd if you took the drive apart, you'd just see a clear piece of glass.
Wow.
It was pretty cool.
Wow. I went through all those hard drives. I think I mentioned that on here, right? That I fished that giant stack of old hard drives out of the closet.
Oh, really?
And an old motherboard with an IDE port on it, and my 1996 SCSI controller.
Have you been going through them?
I did it. I finished. I'm done.
Is there anything good?
No, there was nothing.
Oh.
It was nothing but old empty Windows installs with nothing in the user accounts. Apparently I got everything off of those drives and then didn't dispose of those drives.
Wow.
But I bring it up because there was only one SCSI drive in that stack, and it was about 20 years old. And I had forgotten about this.
Was it like a 30 gig or something?
18 gig.
Wow.
It was an 18 gig Seagate Cheetah.
Yeah. That was a 10,000 RPM drive. That's a good ass drive.
I just booted off an Ubuntu Live USB stick on that old motherboard.
Yeah.
I had forgotten about this, but that drive had started making some really interesting grinding sounds by the time I finished using it.
Oh boy.
And was reminded very, very abruptly when I booted that thing back up, because 30 seconds after I turned it. Also, I had never shorted the power switch pins on a motherboard before until this.
Oh, really?
As an aside here, this isn't totally tangential, but what the hell was I doing for the last 20 years?
Well,
I have always tried to that short ass cable that actually plugs the power switch to those pins. Always would because my operating procedure, I don't know about you, I assume a lot of people do this, is to, assemble everything outside the case and make sure it actually boots before you go to the trouble of mounting it all. Nope.
Really? I just chuck it straight in there and let it rip.
Ironically, I've never had anything not post or be DOA or anything like that. But
it's like Tracy Jordan said, you got to live every week like it's Shark Week, Brad.
Okay, sure. That's fair. But I had no idea it was so easy. Like, what the hell was I doing? Like, trying to run cables to bare motherboards all the time when I could just pop a screwdriver on there for half a second.
Well, so we made a bunch of like just dongle with a little momentary switch on the other end.
That's a good idea.
So you just dunk that in. But now I don't think I've had a board that doesn't have a button on it for power and reset in years.
My 3 boards ago in like our mid 2000s, I had one of those. But since then, maybe it's because I always buy the like. Let's say that I feel like my feelings on a good like acceptable pricing for a motherboard are, let's say, $100 to $150.
Yeah, so I think you're probably just under the price because I usually get the last time I got one that had a bunch of PCI Express lanes. No, I had the right USB controller, and it was more expensive. So
I might go a little nicer on the next build, but yeah, I usually go for the bang for the buck kind of bare bones board.
I figure since I have a motherboard usually for 4 or 5 years, I splurge.
Yeah, that's a good point. Anyway, back to the original point. I booted that motherboard up with that SCSI drive plugged in, and like within 30 seconds, my girlfriend at the complete other end of the apartment was like, "What is that? What are you doing? Like, what? That sounds really bad." I wish I had recorded it.
What?
Like it was
Did you have any that the bearings were seized up on or anything?
It might be something like that. Well, I don't know. Like it was. I wish. Like I said, I wish I had an example of it because it was like an otherworldly sound of this just like electrical, like sort of mid-range tone, like grinding, whining kind of sound.
You could probably just plug it in and it'll make the sound even if you don't plug it into the motherboard.
So that's what I'm getting there. So I heard that sound. I was like, this drive is so dead. There is no way I'm getting anything off of this. It totally rang up. Like the Ubuntu saw it and I was able to get in there and I rsynced all the, granted there was nothing worthwhile on there, but like I rsynced all the data off of there. And then I was going to like do the kind of write random gibberish to it to kind of zero it out before I get rid of it.
Yeah.
It got some ways into that process and kind of seized up, like the progress stopped. And I was like, what is going on with this thing? Maybe I should reboot this. And so I got to control seed that process and rebooted. Drive no longer recognized.
That's it.
I powered the thing off and like plugged a different Molex in or whatever just to see what would happen. Drive would not even spin up after that. Like, like literally about 20 minutes before the drive died forever, I got all the data off of it.
This is like your Jurassic Park. Like that drive was just waiting the last 20 years for you to come back to it. And it just wanted to see you one more time, Brad.
Totally. It gave up all its data.
Right.
Like, I mean, this would be a better story if there would actually been anything worth a shit on there. But still the idea that I got every bit of data off of it literally about 20 minutes before it died forever.
That's amazing.
Just felt like divine providence, sort of.
That's what a yeah. So I have the same big box of drives, and I bought an adapter to pull the stuff off of them.
Okay, you did the smart thing. You treated yourself as opposed to pulling an old computer out of the closet.
It was like $15 the adapter. I don't think it was really splurging, but
I just figured I would never need it again, so I didn't want an extra thing lying around.
Yeah, that's probably I don't think I could find it right now if I needed it.
Sure.
So,
did you go through your drives?
I have not.
How many do you have? You probably have.
I don't know, 35, 40 pounds. It's a lot.
Okay.
It's a big box.
I only have like 5. I bet you have more than I do.
It's a you know, I don't know, the boxes that you get 4 paint cans in.
Okay.
Like 4 gallons of paint. Sure. It's one of those.
Full?
And it's over top.
Oh my God. That's a lot of hard drives. Okay, we need to talk then about how to get rid of hard drives after this.
I'm going to send you a YouTube video. There's a guy that has an industrial grinder.
Yeah, there are. I know. I looked it up. There are mobile hard drive shredding services in San Francisco. You can literally book time with a truck where they will drive a hard drive shredder to your house.
Yep. That seems like a lot of work,
but I don't know.
Probably expensive too.
Yeah, the pricing was such that it was like, ask us for a quote. I was like, if I need a quote, I probably don't want to do this.
Yeah, if you have to ask, you're not gonna. What you need to do is get a bunch of people over. We're gonna have a hard drive shredding party.
Yeah,
and we'll have this will be the first Tech Pod meetup. Okay, I guess. So we're gonna rent the hard drive shredding truck. Bring your drives. Any drives.
Anybody in the Bay Area out there has access to a hard drive shredder?
Yeah,
please get in touch.
I killed a motherboard last year trying to make a PCI Express. Mm-hmm.
That's recent.
Yeah. So look, I needed one more slot that was accessible because of the 2-slot video card in my computer. So I bought a PCI extender cable, which is like a ribbon cable that you plug one end into your PCI Express slot and the other end goes into whatever you want to plug in. And instead of getting the one that was $20 from a reputable vendor,
oh no,
I was on Amazon and was like, hey, everybody who buys this instead. Everybody who looks at this buys this instead. I was like, wow, this one's only $5. I'm going to get this. This is great. All it is a cable and 2 slots. That's a slot and a socket. This is no big deal.
It's just electricity. What could go wrong?
I plugged it in, turned the computer, pressed the computer button. Nothing. Like usually when the computer is not quite right, like, you get like a fan moves a little bit and then nothing.
When there's literally no motion of any kind or no lights of whatsoever, you're in trouble.
Didn't make a hum.
You're in trouble.
So I pulled the slot extender. I'm like, shit, maybe this thing's bad. So I pulled it, hit the button again, still nothing. I take everything out of the computer, nothing. I take the CPU and RAM out of the computer, nothing.
Oh boy.
I take the CPU and put it in another motherboard in my streaming PC, which uses the same motherboard. Works. Okay. Well, at least I didn't torch the CPU. That's good. It became clear that the motherboard was completely dead. And luckily I was able to get a replacement that was exactly the same. So it wasn't really.
That's, man. Yeah. And the thing went straight in the trash.
Hashtag blessed. Yeah.
The extender.
Yeah. You know what? I found it under my desk the other day because I must have thrown it on the back of the desk. I wrote a scathing review on Amazon, though.
I sympathize. Yeah. I go through that exact thought process every single time. There is always the no-name, very cheap version of the thing you want. Well,
so there are places that's a good idea. Like, I don't know, USB thumb drives probably safe, right?
Yeah,
well, maybe
probably
not. Maybe they have malware or something on them, but
or USB flash drives just don't last a long time, so they may very well die in 6 months.
My experience with FreeNAS has given me a completely different feeling about how reliable USB flash drives are.
Yep.
But yeah, that was a bad time. I was pretty upset about that one.
Yeah, that sucks. That's a rotten one.
Luckily, when I posted, I hit up like one of my friend Discords or Slacks or something and was like, hey, does anybody have one of this board? And a friend of mine who works in the industry was like, yeah, I have one in my gear closet.
Oh, wow.
Do you want it?
There you go.
I was like, yeah, what do you want for it? And he was like, oh, you can just have it. I'm not building any more 1123 or whatever, 2011, whatever socket that X99 was.
Some hot hand-me-down hardware.
Yeah.
I guess I could do one more real quick.
Yeah,
speaking of hand-me-down hardware, I had an IDE hard drive, like a powered hard drive enclosure.
Okay,
this would have been a USB 2 one. This was probably 2005-ish, let's say.
And this is an enclosure for like a big 3.5 inch hard drive?
A full-on 3.5 inch IDE hard drive with its, like I said, with its own external power supply. The enclosure had its own power supply and a toggle switch on the back to turn the drive on and off.
Nice.
And it was a USB 2. This was like before you could really get like miniature laptop drives in like nice tidy enclosures, right?
It was before the USB had enough power to drive those. Right. Those drives took too much power for what USB could do at the time.
It was a complete no name, no branding on it, no nothing. It was given to me by, I think, my roommate's boyfriend at the time. He was just like, I don't need you. Here you go. And I apparently thought it was a good idea to take the hard drive that I had like my entire life's worth of like personal data on up to that point and put that drive in that enclosure. This is like everything, like every paper I ever wrote in college, like tons of photos of all my friends from college, like the old band MP3s, just everything you can think of, like just every file you would ever think about saving.
Your digital life.
Yes. And I left it running all the time. It was an external thing that it was plugged into my PC and I never turned it off.
Oh no.
Until one day I smelled something acrid.
Oh no.
And noticed that there was some smoke coming out of that enclosure.
No, I never want to smell that. That's such a I don't want this smell.
It was a terrible idea. Like, it was insane to not have a backup of that stuff. It was insane to trust it to that ridiculous, crappy enclosure.
Yeah.
Whatever. It was all gone. All gone.
Oh, completely. It wiped the data?
Like, the drive wouldn't boot. Like, it wouldn't, I can't remember if it would spin up and not be accessible, or maybe it wouldn't even spin up. I forget.
Oh, Brad, I'm so sorry.
Well, so it has a happy ending, but like, you want to talk about divine providence.
Okay.
an incredibly gracious, I don't even know how this came up, but an incredibly gracious old friend from IRC from back in the day. I'd happened to be talking to him. I think I gave up on that drive for like 3 years or something, if I remember. Like I could check my email to make sure, but I literally think that thing sat in a shoebox for like years, thinking like maybe someday. Like I actually looked into professional data recovery.
Yeah.
Like that's how much I was bummed that I lost that stuff. And it's, it's thousands of dollars. This old friend that I happened to be talking to years later, it turned out I hadn't talked to him in a while. He had gone into professional data recovery.
Oh man.
And he fixed it for me.
That's amazing.
He had me send it to him, and I need to I still need to track him back down. I don't feel like I ever properly I mean, I lavished praise on him, of course, but I should have bought him a new car or something. I could not believe that he went to that much trouble. I think what ended up happening was he had to, it was the controller chip on the PCB of the drive went bad or something fried.
You can often, we experimented with this a little bit at Maximum PC a couple of times thinking we could make a story out of it. But if you can get the same variation of the controller board, same BIOS and everything.
He literally harvested a part off of an equivalent drive and soldered it onto this drive to get it working again. In any case.
Wow.
And again, if you're out there, you know who you are. I need to get back in touch with you. I feel like I've never quite made good for that. Honestly, that experience has driven every bit of my NASing and all that, backups on top of backups and stuff ever since then. That one experience, I feel like I dodged such a bullet there. I was I should never have less than 3 backups again.
So speaking of things that are backed up, did you ever solve the USB, the Xbox 360 USB drive?
That was the last one. I had totally forgotten that I felt like I should bring up. Have I talked that to death? I guess not on this podcast.
We've not talked about it all on this podcast, but it has been a long running bit on other podcasts.
That USB flash drive is still in pieces in my desk drawer at work to this day.
Oh man.
So what happened was, people might remember when the Xbox 360 launched, it had proprietary memory cartridge type things.
Up to 32 megabytes.
Yeah, they were gigantic. Really put a lot of stuff on there. Anyway, at some point they relented and were you can just use any USB flash drive to put your Xbox 360 saves on. Yeah. This was probably 4 or 5 years after launch or something.
Halfway through the generation, probably.
So I was ooh, I'm just going to go buy a nice high-end fast SanDisk, 32 gig, and keep all of my 360 saves on there. Period. All of them. I was
forever.
Why wouldn't I want all of my saves with me at all times?
You can just put on your,
I used it for some quick look we were recording. I feel like it was Street Fighter 4 for some reason, or some Street Fighter 4 DLC or something, whatever. I had it in the machine because I was using my save file. I'm pretty sure what happened. I've never been able to verify this, but I'm pretty sure. So that thing has kind of a lengthy shutdown process. It'll continue writing various things.
The 360?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I'm pretty sure you would see the access light on the flash drive continue to be active for a few seconds after you turn it off.
Yeah.
While it was kind of doing garbage collection or whatever, cleaning stuff up. I have to assume I yanked that thing out of the system after I turned it off, but before it was done finalizing everything. And it just became forever after unreadable.
Wow.
And all of those complete saves, I think I had some in progress saves, but it was really oh, my Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts that had everything unlocked save is gone. My X is gone. My Y is gone. The big one was, this was not that long before Mass Effect 3.
Yeah, I remember I remember this being a Mass Effect 3 sitch.
And yes, my Mass Effect 1 and 2 saves with all of my custom decisions and everything were on that flash drive. And multiple users of Giant Bomb reached out, and I sent the flash drive off in the mail a couple times and had people look at it and disassemble it and stuff. But
no love.
The last guy I sent it to really seems to know his shit, and he had taken it apart and said that he had capability to read the NAND chips directly.
Wow.
But that by that time it had been messed with so many times that he said that he could see some of the data on there, but a lot of it was too corrupted to actually be recoverable.
Well, and I mean, what's the file system on the 360?
I don't know.
Flash drives.
I don't know what that was using.
Is it something that you could potentially read files on, or is it something that you just have to do a bit by bit copy and put it on a new drive and hope it works when you plug it in?
That's a good question. I actually don't know.
I'm always curious about low level hardware stuff.
Like I said, I think he said he saw some identifiable data on there. He was able to read some of it, but a lot of it was just garbage at that point.
Yeah, so, I guess it isn't encrypted because people can people pull like their Fallout or Metal Gear saves or whatever and move it from.
It may have been encrypted and people just broke it, or they found some way around that stuff. I forget, because there are tools you need to make those things work. Anyway, I never got back. That was I burned my one get out of jail card on that old hard drive.
On the old hard,
and so
I think that was a good trade.
Yes. If I had to pick, that was the right one. I had ended up downloading somebody else's Mass Effect 2 save and just using a save editor and just kind of recreating my stuff to the best of my ability. Well, so that worked fine.
Yeah, that's what I did, because I switched from Xbox to PC for the third one, I think. And I just recreated a save from the beginning. It was a good time.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. There's our tech horror stories.
That's all. That's based on everything lately. I think that's all the horror stories I can deal with right now.
Secretly, we did this. I suggested this topic because I wanted people to send their own horror stories in.
Oh man, I would. Does that count as an email episode, or do we get to do that separately? Because I would totally sit here and read other people's horror stories.
Let's see how they go.
Okay.
The email address is techpod@content.town. If you email them in, we will take a look at them. I'm like, this is my favorite thing to do with like nerds who've been on front lines of support and stuff for a long time, because you like the capacity for people fucking things up is infinite,
limitless.
Yeah, it's always really entertaining. As always, huge thank you to all of our patrons. Patrons.
Long A.
Patrons.
It is not a tequila brand. They're patrons.
Anyway, thanks to all of our patrons, especially our executive producer level patrons, Kurt Brownridge, Jacob Chappell, Andrew Cotton, and David Allen. Thank you all so much.
Big thanks.
If you want to find out how to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/techpod. That's patreon.com/techpod.
Finally, we've unified our pronunciation.
Exactly. And
talk about standards.
Somebody needs to make a guide to pronunciation that doesn't involve typing into Google and watching like a 4-second YouTube video for words and names.
Yes.
That is a product I would subscribe to.
CMOS, right?
CMOS. Yes.
Is that how you say it? Okay.
Asus.
Oh, I can't. I'm sorry.
They came by and gave us pronunciation lessons for that one day.
I can't, man. I'm sorry.
But yeah, if you back the Patreon, you get access to the TechPod Discord. Due to popular demand, Brad, I added a new channel.
Whoa. Oh yeah, I saw.
It's
executive decisions.
I'm glad that we finally settled on a name for the video games channel.
Yeah, for now.
I think Destiny and other games is representative of all of our interests.
Yeah, it's
but yeah, we added a mechanical keyboard channel the other day because those conversations. Just once somebody talks about mechanical keyboards in the general chat, it was like all day long.
Yep, that's it. Yeah, forget everything. People love their blues and browns. Their cherries and whatever the hell.
I think I got to get on that clear train.
Okay,
I don't know
what you're talking about.
They're clicky, but not too clicky.
Why? This is topic for another show. Why would they name a mechanical design after colors? That is incredibly counterintuitive.
Because it's the colors on the tops of the Switch, so you can identify them by look.
Oh, internally the Switch is that color? Okay. No, I tell you, you don't have to.
Let me just get get my bag of switches out here.
Oh, I believe you. That's fine.
I'm going to hold it up to the camera so nobody can see.
Great.
These are Cherry MX red switches.
Okay. That's that is certainly a red switch.
The little duber on top that you put the keycap on is red.
Yep.
It just tells you where the clicky bit is.
That channel, for the first time, is actually making me a little self-conscious about my 10-year-old Apple aluminum keyboard.
Yeah, it's so boring keyboard.
It's not embarrassing. It's fine.
Look, I wish I had one so that when I had to type something when we're recording a podcast or something, I can do it without making an incredible amount of noise.
That's why I use it. It's so quiet. Nobody can hear me typing.
But the rest of the time, it's nice to know exactly when your keys actuate. Just feel that click, click, click.
I do like to actuate now that you mention it.
But yeah, you can find out more about that at patreon.com/techpod. As always, if you can't support the channel, that's great. We don't care. Tell your friends.
Yeah,
that's how people find out about us. We appreciate
especially
that. Reviews on iTunes.
Yes, especially if your friend is iTunes.
Yeah, tell your friend iTunes how awesome we are or how terrible we are. We don't care. Like, do whatever you need.
Sure. Say what you feel.
I think is next week our question episode. It is. Yeah,
maybe.
No, we have one more.
Okay.
So maybe we might do people's tech nightmares next week. Maybe that'll be the Patreon only episode this month.
Sure.
I don't know.
You know what?
We'll see.
We can do whatever we want.
Yeah, it's our podcast.
Yeah, except
there's no corporate overlord here.
Well, there are the executive producers. We gotta.
I mean, the executive producers, yes, but they are so far benevolent.
Yes, that's true. Just make sure you look busy when they walk by.
They haven't. Nobody's told me to sexy up my look for this podcast yet, which I really appreciate.
Yeah,
I haven't had any content creative consultants come in and tell me, that Jenna Marbles channel is really popular. You should try doing stuff that's more like them, because that's a real conversation I had with people one day.
Great.
Yeah. I mean, I like Jenna Marbles seems fine. I don't have any beef with.
Oh, sure.
But
yes,
but her bit is funny. I like it.
Corporate mandates, on the other hand, though.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
Not a fan.
Yeah. Anyway, see y'all next week. Thanks, Brad. Bye, everybody.